to the quest for the Green Bowl, the rise of Azath. This is part 2 of the week where we preview the next slate of matchups in our league and also get some lore on our next game of the week, one of our home bases. And of course, we also are going to get some interesting battles as bye weeks begin to cause havoc. I mean, it always causes havoc. We still have 2 undefeated teams, though it is unlikely that lasts for much longer. Will we have one team or both teams lose out on the dream of perfection this week? We don't know. The 1-4 teams are in desperate need of wins, and they don't have easy matchups. And the 2 and 3 teams will be hoping to get some advantages in another big week in the cluster that's in the middle of the standings. Tiebreakers are things to watch for as well with so many close teams. These matchups are all very important, especially when we start to get closer to the end of the season, seeing how all the playoff races actually come into play. And of course, our game has one of those matchups going in with both squads needing to win after multiple losses in a row. This week, we will be taking a trip to EO, where 2 and 3 Green Acres hosts Europa's 2 and 3, the clash at Demon Head at the lava Castle of Drusus.
It is time to learn more about one of the hot spots on the moon of Io. And this time, we explain the significance of the lava castle of Drusus. Drusus, a name similar to something in your ancient Roman history books, is from another dimension, like us. A leader that we shadows once met before we came to your pathetic dimension. Drusus was considered an all-powerful demigod until we used the power for our own means in the search of that trophy of yours. The problem was that the beings in the dimension realized that Drusus was only as powerful as a staff made of ice. So naturally, once we knew we weren't going to find what we needed and had to leave, we decided to have a little fun. We gave the beings power to banish Drusus into another dimension. Drusus was sent somewhere to live in a castle, meant to symbolize the illusion of power. But they surrounded Drusus with a moat of lava and fire. The ice staff was useless outside the castle, so Drusus was imprisoned. Leave the castle and become mortal. Something no being would do. It was so funny when we found Drusus here on Io, though. The odds are not in favor of such luck for us. You see, Drusus never knew we had been the tricksters, so it was really easy to convince we went looking from dimension to dimension to be the saviors. We then explained the history of Azath, a powerful being that could break the barrier that keeps Drusus contained. All lies, of course. Drusus is obsolete. We don't need or care about what happens. But we decided to use Drusus to mess with you. Drusus believes that your group are the ones to imprison and limit the powers needed to rule all once again. So for the one who calls this spot home, and anyone who visits, remember to beware when you search the halls of this castle. And try not to let the nightmares get to you. Drusus' favorite thing to do is to drive his victims into madness and force them to beg for mercy. A mercy that never comes. Drusus is lonely and always wanted some toys to play with.
This will be a close one according to the computers, with Green Acres coming in with a 54% chance to win. But I see this one being even closer than that. Both teams have some low-scoring weeks lately, and we'll be hoping for not just a big game by an individual, but more consistency all around. One of the key areas for Green Acres is at quarterback, with Joe Burrow going up against Matthew Stafford. Burrow faces a Saints defense that got torched by Geno Smith in Week 5. Stafford plays a Carolina defense that held Kyler Murray in check for the most part. The advantage goes to Green Acres there. McCaffrey versus Harris is big because both have tough matchups. McCaffrey also has an interim coach after Matt Rule was fired, so it'll be interesting to see the usage of McCaffrey here if that changes. Diggs versus CeeDee Lamb is another area of advantage for Green Acres, with Lamb going up against the Eagles' stout pass defense and Diggs getting Kansas City in a potential shootout. That shootout could also limit the points for the Bills' defense for the clash at Demon Head, while the Vikings' defense for Green Acres may be up against a third-string quarterback and an injured Tyreek Hill this week. But there are two players that will be needed to change the tide in this match, and this is, of course, my opinion, but for the clash at Demon Head, I turn to Jacksonville Jaguars running back Travis Etienne Jr. Etienne was expected to take a bigger role last season before a season-ending injury, and that left us all waiting to see what would happen in 2022. As expected, he did start slow, but he may be turning a corner now after collecting 71 yards on 10 carries and 43 yards on 3 receptions, being targeted 5 times last week. The one thing fantasy owners want to see, though, is touchdowns, which is something that hasn't come yet. The Colts defense does rank 14th in fantasy with points allowed against running backs. That includes 3 rushing touchdowns. But if Etienne keeps getting work in the passing game, it could mean big things are coming soon. I mean, he did run a 4.45 40-yard dash in the combine. So he definitely has speed, he's got agility, he can make plays in the open field. We know this from college. Does it happen here? Well, it's hard to say for certain, but fantasy owners will definitely be sad if they miss out on that first breakout game, which we all feel has to be coming, right? The other Jaguars running back, James Robinson, was getting a lot of work early this season, kind of being a little sleeper so far, but he only had 27 yards on his 10 carries last week against a very porous Texans runs defense that ranks 4th worst against running backs. He also had 12 yards on only 2 targets. Not the kind of production you want to see. Those numbers suggest that Etienne could be in line for more work, especially since the Jaguars need to right the ship after the last few losses. The clash at Demon Head seems to desperately need Etienne's first touchdown to come this week when looking at this league. But if Robinson vultures anything at the goal line, the waiting may continue for Etienne's owners. Moving on to the home side, I go to Green Acres, turning to tight end Taysom Hill. Clearly, Hill is not the prototypical tight end. He's more of a running back first, quarterback second, tight end third. And somehow the Saints rewarded fantasy owners by making him a tight end on the depth chart. Last week against Seattle, he had 112 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns on just 9 carries. Again, Seattle's the 5th worst run defense in fantasy, so you got to take that into account. He also threw for a touchdown, 22 yards, and had one of the bigger tight end scores all season. He actually now has 6 overall touchdowns, just 3 shy of last season's total of 9 that he had, and halfway to his season best total of 13 from 2020. Can I remind you that he's a tight end on the depth chart? Are you serious? He actually has the 2nd most touchdowns by any tight end behind just Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. They both have 7 touchdowns. He also has 228 rushing yards, and no tight end can say that. Seems like a no-brainer start at the position, hungry for more production. But I do want to add this caveat. The Bengals defense is 14th against tight ends, but are ranked 4th best against running backs, allowing just 1 rushing touchdown all season. They can stop the run well, and that is Hill's strong suit. But anytime a tight end can score multiple times in a game and have so many ways to make plays, it's hard to sit them, regardless of matchup. Green Acres will be looking for a game, maybe not as nuts as last week, but one with maybe a touchdown, maybe 60 yards, something like that. That alone would be a big boost, and with Kamara's sudden fumble problems and other banged-up players on the Saints' offense, Hill could be used a lot, especially in the red zone. If Hill doesn't score, then that could be the clash of Demon Head's chance to make up points. Regardless, this should be an exciting matchup. As always, our game of the weeks get exciting. And it may go to Sunday or possibly Monday night, depending on the roster moves. Of course, there are some other big-time head-to-head pairings across the league this week. We start with the 4-1 Elite Mother Tuckers hosting 1-4 the Stellar Bitches at the Volcanic Plateaus of Vulcan in an Io versus Ganymede matchup. The lopsided records are given vindication with the computer projections, handing the newly crowned #1 ranked Elite Mother Tuckers a 77.1% chance to win. Derrick Henry is on a bye for the Stellar Bitches, which isn't good. Losing Javonte Williams for the season means Hines and Edmonds will be called upon at running back. That leaves the Mother Tuckers with a huge advantage with Eckler and Mostert. The Mother Tuckers do have Josh Jacobs on a bye, and there is the oddity of having the Cowboys defense and quarterback Jalen Hurts. If one does really well, that usually means the other one doesn't, though a defensive touchdown could allow both positions to thrive. The Chargers' defense has not played well lately, but gets an inept Denver offense with an injured Russell Wilson. The Bitches also have Kirk Cousins, who seems to get 20 points consistently. The keys for me here are actually at the flex position. The Elite Mother Tuckers have options, but also have some injuries. Tyreek Hill is in a walking boot and is questionable, though it is said that he may still play as of Wednesday. Andrews is clearly an advantage on Freiermuth, but Evans would be an advantage over an injured Hill. Gabe Davis could also be in a shootout, which makes his big playability a potential game changer. Crazier things have happened, but it would be a huge upset if the Bitches pull this one off. My 5-0 undefeated Dark Ridge Dreamers travel to the ship graveyards at Beatrix Lane to take on the 1-4 Siamese Dreamcats in a Europa versus Io matchup. The Dreamcats actually enter with a 51% chance to win, which means the computers essentially call this one a toss-up. And of course, this is a rivalry matchup with the winner taking home the Golden Cat Necklace. Some moves may still be made depending on injuries and gut feeling, but at the moment, the Nick Chubb versus Ezekiel Elliott, Kyler Murray versus Lamar Jackson, and Justin Jefferson versus Cooper Kupp matchups seem to be the key areas. The Rams versus Colts defense and Gano versus Koo at kicker could be big too, but the question will be the matchups overall. Chubb and Jefferson have rough ones. Are they matchup proof? We'll find out. Jackson can also put up monster numbers, and the Dreamcats have the quandary of hoping Kirk goes off while also getting a good game out of the Colts defense. This one screams Monday night finish. Next, 1-4, remember the Titans host 2-3 Uncle Justy at the Polar Castle of Thanasu, the Ganymede versus Europa matchup. This is big for both teams as Uncle Justy goes for a third straight win, and the defending champs look to make a move back toward the top 6. This is one of those probably matters with the end of the season tiebreaker battles games. The computers say toss-up, with remember the Titans having just a 50.5% chance to win. Geno Smith, who was just picked up on waivers by Remember the Titans, versus Tom Brady will be a key matchup. Remember the Titans have been searching for a consistent quarterback all season. Barkley and Fournette versus Kamara and Hall also are interesting. Fournette has the toughest matchup of all these players, but Barkley seems to be an advantage over Kamara at the moment. Chase continued his non-first-round pick play so far, which isn't that great, and Uncle Justy might need that to change here. On the other side, A.J. Brown needs a bounce-back game for Remember the Titans. And then, of course, we get the defenses. The Eagles have been solid for Uncle Justy, but the Jaguars get a tasty matchup against the Colts offense. Wilson versus Stevenson at flex could also be a difference, but I'm really looking at those defenses. This almost feels like a playoff match with how close it is. Moving on to 2-3, AR's Ayahuasca Plant hosting 2-3 Risky Business at the Peaks of Tracos in Ganymede versus Io battle. And in what should be another close one, AR's Ayahuasca Plant enters with a 53% chance to win. Mahomes has a tough matchup on paper, but it is expected to be a shootout. So AR's Ayahuasca Plant needs Rodgers to do his usual 20 points and hope for other points elsewhere. The same goes for the Kittle versus Kelsey matchup at tight end. Aaron Jones versus A.J. Dillon could be an area to watch, of course. Who will get the carries? Who will get the touchdowns? Will they even get any carries? I don't know with that Packers play calling. Sanders and Montgomery versus Mixon and Hunt look to be key as well, with advantages going to risky business. The advantages with AR's ayahuasca plant when it comes to Metcalf and Lazard versus Godwin and Thielen at wide receiver. When all is said and done, though, I'm really looking at the Packers versus Dolphins defense as what decides this one. Lastly, we get a Europa versus Ganymede game that entices all of us in the league as 3-2 Loki Lebowski Thor hosts 5-0 multiple scoregasms at the Salt Mines of Thorgard. Lebowski Thor enters with a 59.8% chance to win. And that's due to the uncertainty on the scoregasms, as injuries and bye weeks have kind of messed with her lineup a little bit. Still, Josh Allen is expected to feast in a shootout, while Herbert on the other side has a kind of a tough matchup. And that seems to be the reason why McKenzie is also in the scoregasms lineup, looking for all those points in that one. But the same can be said for Edwards-Helaire, who goes for Lebowski Thor. While James Conner is questionable for the scoregasms, that could be a big turning point. A Jonathan Taylor return could be huge for the scoregasms. We're talking about the number 1 overall pick, but Olave is still in the concussion protocol, and Benjamin is a desperation play at flex, really. And if Conner can't go, maybe it's not so desperation, but if Conner does go, it's definitely desperation. Samuel and Cook are expected to be the leaders for Lebowski Thor, but Melvin Gordon could always fumble his way to the bench. And there is a feeling that the computers might not actually be expecting a shootout with Buffalo and Kansas City like us humans do. Because to me, this seems more like a 50-50 toss-up, especially since it looks like the defense scores could be a difference. The Bucs look to feast on the Steelers. The 49ers look to decimate the Falcons. This week is actually shaping up to be one of the most fun when we actually look at all of the matchups and all of the league standing implications. There's going to be some jumbling, most likely. The undefeated teams are both underdogs, too, so can we see the end of all the perfection talk? 1-4 teams can turn their season around with just one big result here. And the playoff races could be even more muddled as we close in on the halfway point of our season. The fate of the universe seems to be in dire straits as well, with us not really knowing what's going on yet. Puzzle pieces and mystery. And that's the content for the show, everyone! Join me Sunday when the Game of the Week winner, Loki Lebowski Thor, joins me for some fantasy football and some hopeful apocalyptic sci-fi fun. Until next time, salut. Before you go, check out the updated standings.